Hey, all you remote learners out there. So today in class, we're going to be kind of reviewing why the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. And remember that the rough draft of your essay should be done at this point, and you're going to be needing to find someone to revise your rough draft. It can be anyone, your mom, your dad, your grandma, your neighbor, your pastor, your friend, anybody can revise it. And so you're going to fill in the name of the person who revised it. They should make some comments in the Google Doc. They should fill out that revision form saying whether you have each necessary component. They should be giving you kind of a strength or weakness, and you're submitting that revision form. And you can find all that under classwork where it's under the final draft assignment. And then the rest of class today, we're just going to do a little bit of notes, a little bit of video clip as we're discussing Pearl Harbor and the attack. So we kind of talked last time before spring break about why the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. And we said that the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor for a variety of reasons. One of them has to do with ego and the fact that the Japanese believe that they are this new world order and that it is their destiny to conquer all of Asia, that they are the supreme Asian nation. They have joined, forces with the other Axis powers, the Germans and the Italians, and they feel that, it's only natural that they're going to take over the world, basically. And of course, that's all kind of shown in Document A. And who's standing in their way is the United States, because they want to control the Philippines. The Philippines has lots of resources, and the U.S. owns the Philippines. And so we're standing in their way. It's not the invasion of Manchuria that really kind of impacts the United States at all. The Japanese, remember, got Manchuria back in 1931. The attack does not happen until 1941. We were angered that they invaded China, that they did not respond to our threats, our letters, our notices, that they continued to attack and take over other territory. And so remember, that's when we freeze their financial assets. And then we pass this embargo where we refuse to trade with them. So now they're not getting access to different airplane supplies and parts for tanks and other weapons. And finally, we limit their oil supply. And this is a real problem because 80% of the oil that they were getting was coming from the United States, mostly coming out of Texas and areas in the Southwest. So they want to conquer Asia. They believe that it is their destiny, as shown in Document A and those documents. We are standing in their way, right, with the Philippines. And as you saw in Document C, we're cutting off their access to materials, first by freezing their financial assets, by having an embargo. We refuse to trade with them and sell them goods that they need to make war. And then ultimately with Document D, you see that we're cutting off their oil supply. So we're leading you to this conclusion that war is basically inevitable. And the United States and the Japanese saw that war was on the horizon. And since the Japanese believed this, they felt that, they might as well attack first, have the element of surprise on their side, since we were not officially at war with them. If they could destroy the Pacific Fleet, then potentially it would be a quick and easy victory. So you kind of see that a little bit in Document E and into Document F. So when you're writing your thesis statement, a lot of you chose to focus just on the economic side, talking about the embargo, talking about oil, talking about freezing the assets. It's difficult to write an entire essay when you're just talking about economics. If you broaden your horizons and you talk about kind of more the social reason, right, the fact that they were egotistical and arrogant and, racist and believed that they were better than others, if you talk about, more of those motivations, or in terms of, they felt that because of their political alliance with Germany, they had to look strong, they had to conquer others. It was either kind of kill or be killed. And because of their decisions and responses to the United States and increased tensions, it seemed like war was going to be inevitable. So if you kind of diversify your reasons, it gives you a lot more to write about. And remember, you're including a quote in your essay, but you only need one. It could be your hook, it could be in your intro paragraph, it could be in one of your body paragraphs. The whole point of a quote is it's supposed to enhance the reading experience. You don't need to give us a quote where you define embargo. You can simply do that in your own words. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what you have written. But remember, I don't really read the rough drafts. It's just really a checkpoint kind of grade. So, have somebody else read it. Make sure you're never using you or I or me or we anywhere in your writing. And as you're kind of laying out, your first couple of paragraphs here, We're never going to finish writing the entire essay though. We'll do one more writing assignment in our last unit to write that full 5-paragraph essay. So just for the attack itself, I've got a video clip that I posted today. It's from the movie Pearl Harbor. The movie itself is kind of cheesy. The attack scene is pretty decent. It's also rated like PG-13, so it's considered school appropriate. There's a lot of History Channel attacks, which are also pretty good. I posted some of those clips before break. And of course, there's all sorts of speculation about whether FDR knew the attack was coming or not. We don't know. There is a perspective out there where people say he knew about the attack. Him and Churchill had been planning for a war for months. They'd made that Atlantic Charter. They promised to support each other. They talked about their goals for the war, about creating a United Nations when the war was over. They were cracking the Japanese Code Purple. But there's a lot of debate about when that code was cracked. Did we actually know an attack was coming? Did we really, get that message out into the president and to, the naval base in time? Some people say yes, some people say no. A lot of people say that the president knew, that he let the attack happen, that he wanted it to happen because it would be a way to unite the American people together to support basically a war, because otherwise no one wanted to go to war. They felt like people would die and didn't concern us and all those various reasons. But this really kind of got the American people on the support of going to war. The attack itself happens December 7th, which is an early Sunday morning, and we've got a Japanese fleet of 6 aircraft carriers with 423 aircraft, and they're going to be attacking Pearl Harbor Naval Base, which is on the island of Oahu. And they're going after 8 battleships, 8 cruisers, 29 destroyers, 9 subs, 50 other ships, and 390 aircraft. A lot of people say that the president, knew about the attack, and that's why he, didn't have all of our naval ships at the base at the time. Originally, he had moved the fleet from California to Pearl Harbor, some people say to protect the United States mainland from a potential attack. And then, when he knew the attack was coming, he actually sent some of the most important ships out to sea so they would not be destroyed. Perhaps that's true. Perhaps it's just good luck on our part. We don't know. Other people say, well, how come all the planes are so close together and all the boats? They were close together because that's how they simply were stored, and the Americans were very worried about sabotage. All right, so sorry about that. I got interrupted again. But yeah, so that's kind of just an overview of, some thoughts as far as the Japanese coming in and attacking the U.S. As far as the military leaders, we've got Admiral Kimmel he's the commander-in-chief of the Pacific Fleet, and he gets a lot of pushback. A lot of people say, Admiral Kimmel, what were you doing? Why were these ships lined up? And he's like, dude, that's how they're stored. That's just how it goes. It was a Sunday morning. Things were pretty chill. Some people were awake. Some people were at church. Some people were on duty. Some had not started their shift yet. And they're saying, well, why didn't you know that an attack was imminent? Well, they did have, remember, radar at this point. They had the very beginning of it. But radar is pretty shaky. There's no satellites. There's no drones. There's no GPS. And so on the radar, they saw that planes were coming in. But basically, a lot of people said, oh, don't worry about it. There's supposed to be a bunch of B-52 bombers coming in from the mainland, coming in from, California. So they really just didn't kind of worry about it. On the Japanese side, you've got Admiral Yamamoto. He's the commander of the Japanese fleet. They're the two really that you need to know. And he's kind of really in charge of leading this operation. And of course, yet again, you saw this in Document F. A lot of people said, how is it possible that the Japanese could even attack Pearl Harbor? It's difficult to attack. Can you even fly from Japan to Pearl Harbor? Aren't you going to run out of gas? Wouldn't you have to refuel the planes? It's kind of mountainous right there where the naval base is. It's shallow waterways. Could subs go? Could torpedoes go? Could they drop the bombs? And of course, the Japanese have invented new technology to kind of solve these issues and to make it all possible to make the attack happen. And then you can just see some pictures here as far as the pilots as they took off. They saw it as a real ceremony of honor. These pilots from the very beginning are willing to die for their country. They usually, have a picture with them of their sweetheart, of their wife. They're willing to die for their cause. Many of them did alcoholic beverages or shots beforehand. People cheered. They saw this as a great honor to be able to go in and strike the Americans and go to war. They were not fearful at all. They thought they were going to destroy Pearl Harbor, and they were going to really kind of sabotage the US. It would lead to a quick war. Some Japanese would die, but they really thought that this would be fantastic for them and that, it would show the world that they're a true world power, a force to be reckoned with. As far as the attacks, we know that between 7:55 and 8:25 a.m. in the first phase, there were combined torpedo plane and dive bomber attacks. And you can kind of see that in the video clip that I posted from the movie Pearl Harbor. And there's kind of a lull in the attacks from about 8:25 to 8:40. And then we know that there's horizontal bomber attacks. Then there's dive bomber attacks. And we know that basically, about almost 10 o'clock in the morning, the whole real attack kind of wraps up. So within 2 hours is really when kind of we're seeing the assault happen. Now, Americans are trying to get to the planes, but of course the Japanese are very quick to destroy as many planes as possible, to try to kill pilots on the ground. Of course, some Americans do take to the air, but it's very minimal. It's just crazy and chaotic, and there's no chain of command because people are getting killed and they don't know who to take orders from, and the planes are getting destroyed and people are running for their lives, and it's just pure chaos, basically. We know that, just some more pictures here, you can see the Japanese planes. They always have the red circle looking like a sun on them compared to the American planes. But we've got 81 fighter planes, 135 dive bombers, 104 horizontal bombers, 40 torpedo planes, and 5 midget subs. And you can kind of see the images down there as far as the force in the attack. And we kind of already talked about how the U.S. is using radar, but they thought it was just the B-17s coming in from California. And, the Americans just felt like it wasn't possible to have the attack because, they didn't think the Japanese pilots were good. There was a lot of racist commentary out there as well. Americans thought that Japanese people had bad eyesight and that they wouldn't be able to fly planes and they couldn't be great pilots. And yet again, a lot of racist ideas out there as people drew incredibly biased pictures of Japanese people with slanted eyes, and it was just crazy stuff. But yeah, that's what, these racist attitudes basically gets you, an attack, because they kind of really underestimated the power of the Japanese. And then you can really kind of see Battleship Row here. So you see the different ships lined up. So you've got the Oklahoma, the West Virginia, the Vestal, the Nevada, the Arizona there, the Tennessee, and the mainland. And as far as the ones that are sunk, those are the ones that are in red. The Oklahoma, the West Virginia, the Arizona, the Nevada, and the California are all taken out. The Vestal is heavily damaged. They're in orange. And then the Tennessee and Maryland are moderately damaged. As far as some of the ships that are undamaged, it's just kind of some of the other ones that are off to the side, especially as you go up further into that east lock. There wasn't as heavy, attacks there. But even though they're all lined up, it's not that it was trying to make easy targets for the Japanese. We think that most likely it was to prevent sabotage so that you could, have military forces stationed in one position to watch your boats, and then, of course, to watch your planes, to watch your tanks, as you can kind of look further to the south and see the Navy Yard and see kind of the water tower and the tank farm, as they're called, is where, a lot of the tanks are stored, a lot of the planes. Just some quotes here. You can see by the pilots, but, he says, veering right toward the west coast of the island, we could see that the sky over Pearl Harbor was clear. Presently, the harbor itself became visible across the central Oahu plain, a film of morning mist hovering over it. I peered intently through my binoculars, the ships riding peacefully at anchor. One by one, I counted them. Yes, the battleships were there all right, 8 of them, but our last lingering hope of finding any aircraft carriers present was now gone. Not one was to be seen. So they destroyed our battleships, but the aircraft carriers were not there. And they were hoping to get those as well, but obviously they weren't there. They didn't know where they were. They were just supposed to come in, attack, and get out. Aircraft carriers are really important, though, because that means we still have them. And so we can obviously take those into the Pacific, perhaps closer to Japan, wherever we want, and then launch our planes from those aircraft carriers, and then fly over to China, the Philippines, Japan, wherever, and still launch attacks. And if those had been destroyed, we would have been further back, really, in our war capabilities, because we'd have to build those from new. And you can kind of see the first wave of the attack coming into Pearl Harbor, and the second wave, and then like we talked about, for about 2 hours it goes on. The USS Arizona, you saw in the video clip, or you will if you watch it, you can see it really kind of, just gets destroyed, sunk down the middle. And unfortunately, it takes several hours, for water to get into some of those more secure passages, and people are stuck underwater and they eventually drown. And, it's a very depressing death. They're trying to rescue those people, but they can't get to them in time. Really just because of the sheer amount of casualties that have really hit them. And you can kind of see some pictures of the Arizona burning. We know there were almost 1,200 servicemen who were on that ship who died. And as far as casualties, we know that the Japanese suffered less than 100 casualties. About 29 planes were destroyed and 5 midget subs as the U.S. tried to fight back kind of in phase 3, 4, 5. But the U.S. really had the devastating losses with about 2,400 servicemen, 68 civilians, 1,200 wounded, 188 planes destroyed, 18 ships, including the 8 battleships, the 3 light cruisers, 3 destroyers, 4 other vessels, and many others that are damaged, plus all the buildings, tanks, and planes. And so just kind of to see our list there of what was sunk and destroyed. The California, West Virginia, and Ogallala was sunk. The Arizona, the Utah, and the Oklahoma were totally destroyed, but those other 3 were later raised and rebuilt. And of course, the U.S. response is the next day on December 8th. President Roosevelt goes on the air and he goes to Congress and he says, "This is a date that will live in infamy," meaning will be forever remembered. "I beg of you, Congress, to declare war on Japan. We need to put out propaganda. We need to mobilize. We already had a peacetime draft. We need a wartime draft. We need to prepare our soldiers. We're going to need to ration food and supplies. We're going to need to ramp up our production because we're not going to be just helping, the U.S., but Russia is our other ally. We're going to have to work together as a team to take down the Axis powers." And it's going to be a lot of debate going on between the U.S. and Churchill in England and Stalin in Russia about what's the best course of action. Do we go after Hitler first, or do we go after Hideki Tojo and the Japanese first, or do we just take on Mussolini and the Italians? So last but not least, the effects, the outcome, we said 100 casualties for the Japanese, 2,400 casualties for the Americans. The Japanese dealt a crippling blow to the U.S. Pacific Fleet, destroying several of our ships, but luckily not our aircraft carriers. They began their quest for Pacific Empire. As soon as they attack in the upcoming weeks, they're going to go on an island hopping campaign where they're going to start taking over all the Pacific and eventually going in and attacking the Philippines. Really, the U.S., the sleeping giant, has been awakened, and now we're in the war. And it's going to take us a few months to mobilize, but Japan is going to be very surprised to find out that it's not going to be a quick or easy war. It's going to be long and devastating for both sides with huge amounts of casualties and finances. And the U.S. and Great Britain declare war on Japan on December 8th, and Germany and Italy declare war on the U.S. on December 11th. And so now we're in World War II. All right, guys, that's it for now. The only other assignment you're going to be doing this week, besides finishing up your essay, once someone revises it, you're going to make the revisions and turn your final copy by the 9th at midnight. Your other assignment for this week is you're looking at World War II propaganda. You're watching a little video clip, little cartoon that was put out by Walt Disney to get people to support the war effort. It was shown at the movie theater before movies. It kind of mocks Hitler and the Germans, trying to get Americans to be proud of who they are, thankful that we're not living in Nazi Germany, trying to make people laugh at Hitler somewhat so he doesn't seem as scary. So they're positive that we can win against such a stupid man. And you're also going to be kind of taking on the role of propaganda minister, where you're going to be pretending that you are in charge of propaganda for the Axis powers, Germany, or the Allied powers, the US, and you're going to be looking at different real World War II images and trying to come up with a propaganda slogan which could be used to get people on your side to support the war effort. All right, guys, that's it for now. Have a great day. Later.